Hi everyone, welcome to week 4. Hope you've had a good week. This week we've moving on to module 2, which is called Design for HRD. We're in week 4 already, and this week there are two parts. The first is learning theories and principles and design, which are covered here in some detail. Part B is facilitation skills, which is about working with others, and that's really more of a resource for you to have a look at. Many of you will be familiar with facilitation skills and how central they are to HRD professionals. Working with others, it's so important that we know how to facilitate good learning. So these are some suggestions at the end of this section. Okay, so firstly, when we're saying about learning theories, we want to understand the nature of learning and its importance in an organisational context, definition of learning, and key learning theories and learning styles. So I'd like to emphasise here that learning styles are really a small part of the whole learning picture. So learning theories are the overriding theories that we look at, and learning styles are something to be aware of when we're teaching other people, when we're learning ourselves, and even when we're talking with other people, because sometimes we can be coming from different perspectives. We apply learning theories to the design of programs as follows. So the textbook has an overall framework, and this runs throughout this unit. So whereupon we identify needs, design the requirements for what is needed, deliver the activities, and evaluate the activities. So that's called the 4-stage training model, and it's referred to in assessment item 1. Now, I think you would easily see that it's pretty minimal. There's an arrow really that should go, many arrows that should be going around here. So you might like to situate the whole thing in a particular organisational context. So, you know, the needs in this particular organisation. Once you've evaluated how things went, you need to hook back to needs and see whether they've actually been satisfied, whether the learners are happy or not, and whether that learning can transfer, as I mentioned earlier, transfer back to the workplace, for example. And you know, you might then have to think about, okay, I needed to deliver those activities differently or whatever. So this is much more interactive than this model shows, but it's a good sort of basic starting point. So we're really talking here about learning theories and how we can identify what's needed. So it's kind of something that embraces this whole area. So next week, week 5, we go on to identifying needs. So we talk more about each of these particular aspects of the model, but today we're concentrating on learning theories. So there are a lot of learning theories, as you may know, and you probably do know, and we can only concentrate on a few, of course. They can overlap and they can inform each other, and none are perfect. But we can enhance our understanding of ourselves and others and the design of our HRD programs. So your own experience, your own reflections, your own creativity play a big part in the design of any training program. So in the previous weeks, we've talked about strategy, which is the overarching bigger picture type approach, and here we're talking about the more specific aspects of designing HRD programs. So learning theories, some of the approaches that they take is that some learning is formal and explicit. We learn that through very direct means, whereas some is informal. If we experience something like as that top picture suggests, a bushwalk. We can learn a lot on that, but we're not being taught that necessarily from someone else. It's quite informal. We might get it through looking at the environment or talking with others. So it's sometimes it's difficult to draw a direct line between what's formal and what's informal. So I think that's just something to keep in mind as we go through. So there are many definitions of learning. One by Kolb is a knowledge creating process via transforming experiences, knowledge, skills, insight process. So in other words, we're not really like empty vessels where we just have something poured into us, or as you might water a plant or something. We do something with that knowledge, and it's real learning. If we come across new insights, we have new skills, we actually grow in some way. And the other thing is that learning can apply in many different areas. So verbally, we can learn skills about the world, how to talk about our profession, for example, how to enlarge our vocab in some way. Intellectual skills, where we learn about concepts and rules. Motor skills, where we actually learn how to do something physically. Attitudes, beliefs and feelings, a choice of action. So you may be aware, and I'm sure you are, of programs about intercultural awareness, for example, where sometimes our beliefs and our feelings might be challenged, and where we're guided to take certain actions. So that's all learning. And cognitive strategies, how do we manage our own thinking and our own learning processes? So cognitive strategies, how do we identify our own needs? How do we, once we've learned something, such as we might have learned conflict management, for example, it takes cognitive ability to then transfer that into an actual real life example. Another approach that you will come across in the literature perhaps is the difference between pedagogy, which is children's learning, and andragogy, which is adult learning. And Knowles, Knowles, wrote has written a lot about this and really raised awareness of this. He felt that adult learners were a neglected species, as you can see in that 1980 publication, and there's a YouTube clip there for you to watch. But I guess he was trying to say, adults are responsible for their own decisions. They want to know why they're learning. And they've got so much experience in terms of quantity and quality to draw on, and real life situations. He proposed that adults were life-centred and that they were internally motivated, so that they should be in learning situations, and they will be in learning situations that they actually find motivating and that apply to them. So he compared that to children, where the teacher basically decides how things go, where the learners are more dependent, where they've got limited experience, where they're expected to learn what the teacher says, that they're orientated to certain subjects that are prescribed, and really there's an external motivation factor. Now, I think you can question those things now. I think that classrooms should be much more focused on their learners, and when you look at the the curriculums now and the different standards that are expected, teachers certainly need to know how to respond to individual differences, how to draw on children's experience, those sorts of things. But these were the comparisons that Knowles was drawing on. And the greatest input that he had, I think, was saying, we as adult learners have a real place. So you're actually working with adult learners, which is the point of this, in that you'll be working in organisations. And so having a thought about, how we're working with our adult learners, um, I don't think you can argue with Knowles' point that adults have more experience to draw on. However, I think, and as these pictures show, children are actively involved in their learning, as Knowles recommended adults are as well. We're going to look at certain learning theories at the moment: behavioural, cognitive, including experiential learning, and social and socio-cultural learning. So we're following the textbooks categories through here. I've also included excerpts from Noe and Winkler, where you can expand your knowledge of different learning theories. That's on the site. So firstly, we'll look at behavioural, and as you know, probably, this began with animal experiments. Psychologists were great animal experimenters, and for example, Skinner linked rewards and punishments to actions of rats, and he found that rats very quickly learned that if they pulled a lever they got food, which was in essence a reward. And we are subject to rewards. If we perhaps want to gain a promotion, for example, that which we perceive as a reward, we will work towards that. So I think we're all motivated by rewards. In the case of a promotion, we have to understand what's involved in that, what it means, what we have to do. Whereas you could argue that a rat, it's a bit of a more simple process. But we've all had that experience of working towards a reward, and a reward being very motivating for us. So we do respond for rewards, but of course they'll be different rewards for different people. Not everyone will be motivated by money in an organisation, for example. You might be motivated by getting some free time, having a better work-life balance. But if we do receive rewards, and rewards could be praise for a job well done, doesn't have to be tangible, then that tends to make us more motivated if it's meaningful. But the effectiveness does depend on the individual. Different strokes for different folks, as they might say in the US, I'm sure. So another application of this is that HRD programs should progress from the simple to the complex. So the idea behind that is, if we start off with something too complicated, people will feel like they fail. Perhaps they just, are overwhelmed by that. So we have to start off with people feeling confident with new learning, and that they progress on to more complex factors. It's the same with driving a car. The first thing we do is teach somebody to sit, and what the rear vision mirrors are, and etc., before we even set off. So we have to think about what we're learning, how we're going to practice it, and how we're going to teach others a skill. So, as I mentioned, rewards can be much less tangible than a block of chocolate. They could be praise, they could be just recognition, they could be conversation about what you're doing, taking an interest. And it links with goal-setting theories. So we should be setting ourselves challenging goals, but achievable goals. So breaking down tasks can be helpful. So I guess it's a bit like weight loss. If you said, well, I want to, lose a certain amount of weight, without really thinking it through, it can feel completely overwhelming. Whereas, if you set smaller, more achievable goals around exercise, whatever, then that should be more motivating than something that's just an easy goal versus something that's very difficult. Same with learning new computer skills. It's overwhelming to try and learn the whole thing at once. Goal setting theory also has an emphasis on record keeping. What have you achieved this week? It's very motivating to have that written down, and sometimes that really helps people to achieve their goals. What are the small steps did I achieve that? Okay, the second theory we're looking at is cognitive theory now. Cognitive theorists tend to say about behaviourism, it's really simplistic. Piaget was one of the first to say that. He said that there needed to be a lot more emphasis on the brain, and that we can process information, that we have to make sense of information, we have to restructure information, and we store it in our memory. We can have new insights, we can discover new ways of understanding, and we can challenge existing patterns and existing thought processes, which I think we'd have to agree with. So there's been obviously a lot of work with that. MBIT was one way of kind of dealing with this. So that's a way of measuring personality variables. So the thought behind that was that if we tend to be more extroverted and whatever, we'll go out perhaps more to the people around us and learn more from those, whereas the introverted people might need to have a quiet space and reflect on their own about what's going on around. So it's thought that personality variables can play a part in this. So personality approaches highlight this idea of the way we interact with our learning material. We can structure up cognitive patterns and think about how schemas organised. If you've ever done one of those mud maps or whatever about how we get from A to B, very complex. How do we organise information and gaining new insights? So another really important aspect of cognitive approach was looking at the interaction with the person and the environment. So saying, well, a person doesn't exist in isolation, they work with their own environment. So this idea of experiential learning came about, and Kolb, who we're going to elaborate on a bit in a minute, he talked about the value of actual experience. So having something really theoretical is not going to be very motivating unless you can do something yourself. And that's really behind a lot of the training programs. We say you have to actually do something. Even if it's learning about some new piece of technology, you've got to actually do it. This experiential learning idea was more about having an experience and talking to other people about that. So it might be a conflict resolution experience. You might sort of practice out a role play or something like that, reflect on it, and then think about, okay, what does it mean? What does it mean for me as a person? What does it mean for others? How do I develop my skills? And then how would I transfer this to the new situation? So Kolb has these 4 quite well identified aspects to learning that are based on experience, and then reflecting on it, saying what does it say about theory that we know and things that we understand about ourselves, and how do we transfer that. So here's a clip on his experiential learning cycle. You can see at the top that there's concrete experience. We reflect on that, we conceptualise it theoretically, and then we do something with it. So if we experience a role play on conflict resolution, it would be ideal if we ultimately can take that with us into the workplace and do a better job of facilitating a conflict process, for example. He also talked about accommodators, divergers, and convergers. So there are different ways that people bring information together. But in this course, what we're thinking about is how we can use the ideas of a concrete experience, reflection, thinking and active experimentation, working out how to transfer it outside into our training programs. So a training program that doesn't have some sort of concrete experience in it is going to be very deficient, as is one that doesn't give you time to reflect on that experience and theorise about it and think about how you could use it. Honey and Mumford also took up this idea. It's exactly the same. Having an experience, reviewing the experience, making some conclusions from that and planning the next steps. So in your training sessions that you're thinking about in assessment item 2, you need to make sure that you have got these 4 stages. So what are these people going to do to help them to learn more about the situation? So if it's a leadership experience, how are they going to have that? How are they going to reflect on it? How can they make conclusions from it? How can you facilitate that? And then how do you plan to use that in the next phase? Okay. So the idea then is that learning is maximised when all these stages are included. So you have an experience, you reflect on it through discussion, through thinking, through concept mapping, you develop some personal theories, and then you apply it elsewhere. So this should always be clear if you're designing a workshop or some sort of learning situation. So another way of thinking about this, which isn't a learning theory, it's the learning styles, which is saying that in a way these different components, the experience is like an active learning style. Reflection is like is obviously a reflection style, and then there's theoretical learners, etc. And there's another way of looking at it, that some people are visual learners, some people learn more by kinesthetics, by moving, touching, etc. So these are different learning styles, and they sit within learning theories. But again, they're aspects that you need to be mindful of. How do you cater for these different learning styles? How do you make sure you've got visual material, kinesthetic material, oral, hearing? You know, there's all these different styles, and one isn't right and one isn't wrong, and we've all got a mix of all of them, but some people have a predominant style. So that's behind your assessment item 1. One of those, number 3, is about these PART and VARK learning styles and applying that to yourself. We do have some different, we do have a YouTube clip there for you as well. Okay, so the applications of cognitive learning theories is that we are really interested in learner understanding, and that learners be active and that they gain control over what they're learning. They understand what they're learning, they learn how to apply it. And we should organise our information to facilitate learning. So again, learners still need to move from the simple to the complex, and learners need to learn how to learn, what styles suit them, how they best learn, what's their best situation for learning. And that's why I'm asking you to do those PART and VARK learning styles, just to gain those insights for yourself. So these theories have been criticised for having too much focus on an individual, for stereotyping. So, for example, that personality MBTI that I was talking about, where you're categorised, that, you know, that's, oh, you're an introvert, you're always an introvert. And yet we've all got elements, really, of being introverts and extroverts. And if we have certain goals where we want to, if we wanted to, we could become more extroverted. I think many people would claim you can practice that, you can observe others. So we shouldn't be categorising people like that. That, you know, we are interested in interactions. Bandura came up wrote volumes on how learning is about a dynamic interplay between the person, the environment, and behaviour. So, what they actually do. So, he talked about a teacher, for example, has to get the attention of the students, think about how they're going to remember, think about what they're going to do, and on motivation. So, all sorts of ideas there. Excuse me. So, looking at teacher-learner interaction. So this is really getting into the idea of you being a facilitator in a HRD situation. We're looking to build people's confidence, their self-efficacy, and we are interested in people learning in small groups. So if you do have the opportunity to go into an organisation and do some training, then you would be interested in people learning from each other. So another situation that we're talking about there too is the importance, again, other theorists have argued about the importance of the psychological factors. So the application is that our exposure to others and our interaction with them is a source of learning, but I guess just a little caveat there is that we can be inhibited by other people as well. Like if they're too domineering or they're not open to different opinions, then that can be inhibiting. So you've got to think about that in social groups or learning groups. Your own history, your own culture, your own beliefs can inhibit or facilitate learning. If you, according to Henry Ford, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, then you're probably right. So telling yourself you can't tends to inhibit learning. Telling yourself and believing yourself that you can is going to help. So self-efficacy, beliefs about your ability to do that task in the future is important. Learners do like to acquire new skills and knowledge of relevance to themselves, so that idea of needs is really central. And learners may need help to cope with new tasks or solve problems if they feel overwhelmed by that. So the conclusion is that HRD can be linked to frameworks of investigation, of design, implementation and evaluation. Learning theories can inform us about individual learning, our own learning and the impacts of the environment. And training sessions can be used, can be linked to learning theories. So if you're designing a training session, you need to make sure and I think this is common sense really in terms of COL, that you need some sort of activity, time to reflect on it, time to think about it theoretically, and time to apply it to other contexts, and maybe practice and discussion about that, maybe a planning, a detailed plan of what you're going to do. So next week we will look more at training needs analysis, week 5. And part B, as I mentioned earlier, is about having group work, about facilitating groups, the importance of making goals and ground rules. This is really more of a resource for you. It talks about key activities around building rapport, being a process, so that you're a facilitator of learning, not someone who just tries to fill up an empty bucket. Issues for group members: do they belong? Do they feel included? Do they feel safe? Do they feel they can trust you? That they can build a relationship? Those sorts of things. They're important questions for facilitators. How do you build rapport and make sure you notice what's going on? Does the audience suddenly, lose interest, or what's gaining their attention? How do you feel? Your own energy, the group's energy. How do you deal with issues? How do you bring people in? How do you move a group forward? All of those things are really important, and they're up to you building a relationship with your participants. Managing information, dealing with resistance. What causes resistance? Often it's that people don't feel that the training program is actually going to meet their needs. Okay, and here's a scenario for you to think through some of these ideas and answer some questions. Okay, so in conclusion, group work and interacting with others is integral to learning, and hopefully you'll have the opportunity to do that in assessment item 2, and that we've been focusing here on some facilitation and leadership skills that HRD professionals need. In conclusion, a nice garden metaphor is about helping people to learn with having supporting ideas and structures, and helping people feel that they're included and part of the whole process. There's other resources here that will help you with assessment item 2. Different resources. There's a Business Balls website that's got many practical ideas, and as well as your own reading lists. There's some other references and links here that can help you as well. Right, thank you very much, and good luck with getting those assignments going, and I hope that these hopefully slides have helped with that. Thank you.